If my night driver had not missed my exit, I would have unlocked my front door and walked straight into something I was never meant to survive. I am Rebecca Carter. I am 61 years old, and this is my true story from Los Angeles. 6 months earlier, I stood alone beside a hospital bed in Glendale, holding my husband Michael's hand as the machines around him went quiet. We had been married for 39 years. He had taught high school history. I had worked most of my life as a legal assistant. When he died, the life insurance barely covered the medical bills and the funeral. What was left disappeared quickly into property taxes, utilities, and the cost of simply existing in a city that does not slow down for grief. I moved into a small aging bungalow in East Los Angeles that Michael and I had bought decades earlier when the neighborhood still felt like a promise. Now the paint was peeling, the streetlights flickered at night, and silence inside the house felt heavier than noise ever had. Our son lived in Arizona. He called when he could, but we were no longer close. Grief has a way of stretching distances that already exist. At 61, retirement was not an option. I took a night position at a private legal records archive downtown. It was not a law firm. It was a quiet operation that stored civil case files, sealed depositions, and evidentiary documents for ongoing litigation. My job was to log files, verify chain of custody, and flag inconsistencies. The work required focus and discretion. It paid just enough to keep me afloat. My shift ended at 11:45 p.m. For years, I relied on the bus. Then, routes were cut. The last bus now left before my shift ended. Walking through downtown Los Angeles alone at midnight was not something my body or my nerves could manage anymore. My son insisted I download a rideshare app. I resisted until I had no choice. That is how I met Jason. The first time his dark sedan pulled up outside the archive building, I hesitated. It was late. The street was empty. He looked to be in his early 50s with tired eyes and careful movements, but his rating was perfect. 5 stars, hundreds of rides. I got in the back seat and gave him my address. Long night? He asked quietly. Every night, I said. He nodded like that told him everything. Over the next few weeks, Jason was always the one who accepted my ride. Same nights, same time, same calm presence. He never asked personal questions. He never pushed conversation, but he noticed things when I seemed shaken, when I was quiet, when I was cold. In October, I started bringing him tea. Chamomile poured into a travel cup from my own kitchen. The night shift left my hands trembling sometimes, and the warmth steadied me. One night I handed him a second cup. "You do not have to do that," he said. "I know," I replied, "but nights are long." He accepted it with a nod that felt heavier than gratitude. By November, those 12-minute rides were the only time I spoke to another human being face to face. Jason remembered my routine. He remembered the way my porch light flickered. He remembered which nights I locked my door twice. What I did not know was that someone else had been watching too. And the night Jason missed my exit, the life I thought I understood finally split open. That was the night everything began. Jason rarely spoke first, but when he did, it was never small talk. He asked questions that mattered, then waited for the answer without rushing me. Over time, I learned that silence did not make him uncomfortable. He understood it. One night, a few weeks after we first met, he told me he used to be an electrical systems technician. He worked maintenance for commercial buildings across the city for nearly 20 years. Then a scaffolding accident crushed 2 vertebrae in his lower back. The company settled. The job disappeared, pain stayed. Driving nights paid the bills and kept him moving. It also allowed him to check on his mother every morning before sleeping. She lived alone now, her memory fading in unpredictable waves. Jason adjusted his entire schedule around her needs. He never complained when he told me this. He spoke like a man stating facts he had already accepted. As the weeks passed, I realized something unusual. Jason did not just remember my address. He remembered my patterns. He knew which nights I stayed late to finish audits. He noticed when my porch light was off and slowed the car before pulling up. He noticed when the street felt different. Once as we drove past my block, he said, "There is a car parked across from your house that I have seen before." I laughed it off. Los Angeles is full of cars that never move. He did not argue. He simply nodded and kept driving. Another night he asked if I ever brought work home. I told him no. Files never left the archive. Everything was logged. Everything was tracked. He seemed relieved. By December, bringing him tea had become a habit. Sometimes I brought ginger, sometimes peppermint. I did not think of it as kindness. It was routine. It was something normal in a life that no longer felt normal. One night, rain fell hard against the windshield, blurring the city into streaks of light. I mentioned how quiet my house felt now, how even the walls seemed to remember my husband's footsteps. Jason kept his eyes on the road. My son used to say the house sounded different when my father died, he said quietly. You have children? I asked. One, he replied. A son. We do not speak anymore. He did not elaborate, and I did not ask, but his hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. What I did not know was that Jason paid attention not only to me, but to others who mentioned me. Over the past month, he had driven a man who talked too much when drunk, a man who complained about audits, about missing files, about someone in records who was asking the wrong questions, a man who kept repeating my street name like he was memorizing it. Jason had learned to listen years ago after failing to listen once when it mattered. That failure had cost him his son. I did not know that yet. I only knew that when Jason dropped me off each night, he waited until my front door closed before driving away. I thought it was courtesy. I did not realize it was vigilance. And when he began logging license plates in his notes app, memorizing voices and tracking times, he did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a man, making sure he would not ignore the warning signs again. The night the route changed, he was already certain something was wrong. He just needed to be sure I would listen. By January, our nights followed a rhythm that felt almost scripted. I stepped out of the records archive at 11:45 sharp. Jason's car waited in the same spot, engine running, headlights dimmed. I slid into the back seat, set my bag down, and handed him the tea without a word. He thanked me quietly, like we had agreed long ago that words were optional. Those 12 minutes became the only part of my day that felt anchored. I learned that Jason preferred driving nights because the city revealed itself honestly after dark. No performances, no crowds, just people trying to get home, trying to survive, trying to forget. He told me he could tell when someone was lying by how they breathed, not by what they said. Drunk passengers especially talked without realizing how much they revealed. I told him about the audit. It started innocently. A few files flagged as incomplete, a few scanned documents that did not match their physical originals. Nothing dramatic, just enough inconsistencies to make my supervisor nervous. I had been assigned to double-check archived civil cases involving elder settlements and disability claims. I did not realize how carefully Jason was listening. He asked which nights I worked late. I told him Tuesdays and Fridays were usually the worst. He nodded, storing the information somewhere behind his eyes. One evening, as we turned onto my street, I noticed a man standing under the flickering streetlight near the corner, middle-aged, baseball cap pulled low, pretending to scroll on his phone. I mentioned it casually. Jason slowed the car. That man has been there before, he said. I felt a ripple of discomfort. Are you sure? Yes. Third time this week. I told myself it meant nothing. Los Angeles is full of people who do not belong anywhere and everywhere at once. Still that night, I locked my door twice. The following week, I noticed a car parked across the street from my house when I returned home. An older sedan, windows tinted, engine cold. It stayed there overnight, gone by morning. I mentioned it to Jason the next night. He asked for the color, the plate state, the damage on the rear bumper. You notice a lot, I said. I have to, he replied. It is how I stay alive. It was the first time he said anything that hinted at fear. A few nights later, I found my gate unlatched. When I got home, I was certain I had closed it. The latch was old, rusted, unreliable. I told myself it was nothing. Jason did not like that explanation. He asked if I had noticed anything missing. I said no. That was not entirely true. A legal pad I kept by the phone was gone. He simply said, if anything else feels off, you tell me immediately. And the trust between us deepened quietly, built on routine and silence. What I did not know was that the man under the streetlight had been counting the minutes between my arrival and the lights going out. That the parked car belonged to someone who knew my schedule better than I did. That someone had already decided I was a liability. And what I did not know was that Jason had already begun connecting pieces that terrified him. Because the drunk man he kept driving spoke about audits now. He spoke about records being moved. He spoke about a woman who asked too many questions. And he spoke about a house on my street like it was already an unlocked door. The night Jason decided to act, he did not see it as bravery. He saw it as the last chance to keep another person from paying for his silence. And by then, trust was no longer a choice. It was the only thing standing between routine and catastrophe. The night Jason missed my exit, the city felt wrong before I understood why. The night Jason missed my exit, the city felt wrong before I understood why. Rain had just started. A thin, oily drizzle that turned streetlights into smeared halos. I slid into the back seat and passed him the tea, expecting the familiar right turn 2 blocks later. Instead, he stayed straight, merging into traffic that flowed away from my neighborhood. "Jason," I said gently, "you missed Cedar." He did not answer right away. His jaw was tight. His hands held the steering wheel at 10 and 2, like he was bracing for impact. "I need you to stay calm, Rebecca," he said. "And I need you to listen." My stomach dropped. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without being seen," he replied. "Fear has a sound. It is quiet, sharp, and immediate." I heard it in my own breathing. "You are scaring me," I said. "I know. I am sorry. But what I am about to tell you is worse if I say it on your street." He turned into an empty office park, long closed for the night. He parked beneath a flickering security light and shut off the engine. The sudden silence pressed in. Jason turned to face me fully. "Do you know a man named Victor Hale?" he asked. The name hit me like a dropped file. I had seen it in the archive, not often, but enough to recognize it. "I've seen the name," I said slowly. "Why?" He exhaled. "I've driven him 8 times in the last 6 weeks. Always late. Always drunk. Always talking like he thinks no one is listening." My pulse thudded. "What does that have to do with me?" Jason unlocked his phone and held it out. "Because last Friday night, he said your full address out loud. And then he said she's the one pulling files. She's careful, but she's not invisible." My mouth went dry. "There's more," Jason continued. "He said you work nights. He said your house is empty on Tuesdays and Fridays. He said if you take anything home, it will be there." "Take what home?" I whispered. "Files. Notes. Evidence." The air felt thick. "That's not possible. He doesn't even know me." "He knows your routine," Jason said quietly. "And he knows your street." He swiped to another screen. Notes filled it. Dates. Times. Fragments of conversation. "Tonight," he said. "Before I picked you up, I drove past your block." My heart lurched. "Why?" "Because he mentioned you again yesterday. Said tonight would be a good time." Jason's voice dropped lower. "His car was parked across from your house when I drove by. Engine warm. Lights off." I felt dizzy. "That doesn't mean anything." Jason looked directly at me. "I watched him get out. I watched him walk to your gate. I watched him try your front door." The world tilted. "He tried my door?" "Yes." I could barely hear my own voice. "He didn't get in, but he didn't leave either. He stood there, looking inside." Tears burned behind my eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I am not dropping you off tonight," Jason said firmly. "And because you are not going home." "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head. "I don't have anything he wants." "Maybe not," Jason said. "But he thinks you do. And that's enough." Rain tapped against the windshield like a clock counting down. "We're going to the police," he said. "Now." For the first time since my husband died, I felt fear settle deep into my bones. And for the first time, I realized how close danger had been standing to my front door. We did not go to the police immediately. First, Jason drove through side streets, looping through neighborhoods that all looked the same in the rain. He said nothing for several minutes, letting me breathe, letting the shock settle into something I could survive inside. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled. "I need you to tell me exactly what you've been working on." So I did. This time in detail. Over the past 2 months, several civil settlement files had come up incomplete. Original documents missing. Digital scans altered in subtle ways. Amounts adjusted just enough that most people would never notice. Always the same kind of cases. Elderly clients. Injured workers. Immigrants. People who wouldn't have the resources to question discrepancies. Jason nodded slowly. "Victor talked about settlements," he said. "About payouts being redirected." My chest tightened. "I never took anything home. Ever." I believe you, he said. But he doesn't. He pulled into an abandoned grocery store parking lot. The building was dark, but the old sign still flickered weakly above us. Then he showed me his phone again. Notes. So many notes. She checks chain of custody. Audit nights. Tuesday, Friday. House empty after midnight. My hands shook. You wrote all this down? After the third ride, he said. When he kept repeating your street name, I scrolled further. 2 nights ago, Victor asking someone how to disable alarms. Last night, talking about back doors, garages, weak locks. I thought I lost it, I whispered suddenly. What? My legal pad. From my house. It had notes, file numbers. Jason didn't speak for a moment. Then he reached into the console and pulled out a small recorder. I started recording his rides, he said. He pressed play. Victor's voice filled the car. Slurred. Angry. She's careful, but she's slow. If she figures it out, she'll talk. I need to get ahead of this. The recording ended. I stared at Jason. He thinks I have proof? I said. Yes. And he's trying to find it. Yes. Silence stretched. Then something clicked into place. He works nights, I said. That's how he knows my schedule. Jason nodded. He told someone he has keys, said no one checks the basement after midnight. The archive vault. I whispered. He's not just stealing, Jason said. He's covering tracks, and if I find something first, he comes to your house. The reality settled cold and sharp. If I had gone home, I would have walked into a house someone else had already decided was theirs to enter. I wrapped my arms around myself. We can't wait. Jason started the engine. No, he said. We can't. The police station lights cut through the rain ahead of us, and for the first time since that night began, fear turned into something else. Clarity. The police station smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. It was just after 1 a.m, the kind of hour when everything feels thinner. Patience, energy, even the distance between truth and fear. Jason and I sat side by side at a metal table, while an officer took notes. His pen moved steadily, but I could tell by the way he watched us that he already knew this was not routine. I told my story first. My job. The audit. The missing files. The man under the streetlight. The car that kept appearing. The gate. The legal pad. Saying it out loud stripped away every excuse I had made for myself. Every "it's probably nothing" sounded hollow now. Then Jason spoke. He handed over his phone. His notes, dates, times, fragments of conversations, written exactly as he had heard them. Then the recordings. When Victor's voice filled the room, something shifted. The officer stopped writing. He stood up, left the room, and came back with the detective. The detective was older, gray-haired, with the kind of stillness that made you feel like nothing escaped him. He listened. Carefully. Then he said something that made my entire body go cold. Victor Hale works contract security. My breath caught. Security where? I asked. The detective looked directly at me. Your archive building. For a moment the world didn't make sense. He has keys? I whispered. Yes, the detective said. Limited access. Enough to move around without raising suspicion. Everything clicked at once. That's why nothing looked forced. That's why the logs were clean. That's why files could disappear without alarms. He wasn't breaking in. He belonged there. But the detective wasn't finished. There's something else, he said. He placed a photograph on the table. An old one. A group of men standing on courthouse steps years ago. I recognized one face immediately. My husband. Michael stood there, younger, his arm around another man. Victor Hale. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. They worked together years ago, the detective said. Your husband testified in a fraud case that cost Hale his contractor license. He was blacklisted after that. I shook my head slowly. Michael never told me. He probably thought it was over, the detective said. It wasn't. The realization hit like a wave. This wasn't just about files. This was personal. He followed you because of your job, the detective continued. But when he realized who you were, you became something else. A risk. And an opportunity. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. Everything after that moved fast. Warrants were issued. Officers dispatched. Radios crackled with clipped urgency. Jason stayed beside me the entire time, not saying much, just there. 2 hours later, the detective came back. They had found everything. Altered documents. Missing originals. fabricated records, evidence of money being siphoned from settlements, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in Victor's garage, photos of my house, my gate, my back door, notes about my schedule, and a list labeled contingency. What was on it? I asked, barely able to speak. The detective didn't soften it. Your name, he said. And tonight's date. The room went silent. He was planning to confront you, the detective continued. Search your house. Intimidate you. If necessary, silence you. I covered my face and broke. The kind of crying that doesn't sound human. The kind that comes from realizing how close you came to disappearing without anyone knowing why. He's in custody, the detective said quietly, but safety didn't come with that sentence. Only the understanding of what almost happened, and one truth that kept repeating in my mind. If Jason hadn't missed my exit, I would have gone home. The weeks after felt unreal. I didn't return to my house immediately. The police placed me in a small hotel under protection while the investigation expanded. My life became evidence. Every routine I had trusted was examined. Every small moment I had ignored became important. The archive was shut down temporarily. Federal investigators got involved. The case widened beyond anything I could have imagined. Victor hadn't been alone at the beginning, but he was the only one reckless enough to continue, the only one arrogant enough to believe he wouldn't get caught, and the only one foolish enough to talk too much in the wrong car. Jason gave statements. Multiple times. His notes became a timeline. His recordings became proof. When the trial came, I testified. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I told them everything. Across the courtroom, Victor never looked at me. Not once. Jason testified the next day. Calm. Precise. Unshakable. Not emotions. Not guesses. Facts. Times. Words. Patterns. The defense tried to dismiss him. Tried to say he was exaggerating. That he misinterpreted drunken talk. Then the prosecutor asked one question. If you had ignored it, what would have happened? Jason didn't hesitate. Someone would have died. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all counts. Fraud. Evidence tampering. Stalking. Attempted unlawful entry. The sentence was long enough that Victor Hale would grow old behind concrete. But justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like a door closing on something that could have erased me. Life didn't go back to what it was. It became something else. The house changed first. New locks. Motion lights. Cameras. But more than that, I changed. I stopped believing that quiet meant safe, because silence can hide danger just as easily as it hides grief. I went back to work. The archive reopened under new management, stronger systems, more oversight. The audit I had started quietly had uncovered something much bigger than I ever expected. And Jason was still there, still driving nights, but now, I sat in the front seat. We talked more about everything, about nothing. About his son, the one he had lost, not to death, but to distance, to regret, to a moment when he didn't listen when he should have. Then, one evening, his phone rang. He looked at it for a long time before answering. When he did, his voice broke. It was his son. He had seen the news, read about the case, about the driver who paid attention, about the man who didn't ignore the warning signs this time. He wanted to talk. When the call ended, Jason pulled over, and he cried. Not quietly, not carefully, but like someone finally letting go of years of weight. I reached for his hand. Sometimes the truth hurts, I said, but sometimes it opens doors. He nodded, and for the first time, neither of us felt invisible. Now I am 62. I still live in my small bungalow in East Los Angeles. I still work nights. I still drink tea when my hands tremble, but I am not alone in the quiet anymore, because I understand something now. Kindness is not small. It is not meaningless. It is not invisible. Kindness creates connection. Connection creates awareness. Awareness creates action. And action can save a life. I gave my night driver tea. That's all it was. A small, human gesture. But because of that, he noticed me. He listened. He cared enough to act. And because of that, I am still here. So this is what I learned. Evil does not always arrive loudly. It hides inside routine. Inside schedules, inside the belief that nothing will happen tonight. And kindness? Kindness is not weakness. Paying attention is not paranoia. Caring does not make you foolish. Sometimes, it is the only reason you survive. If Jason had not missed my exit that night, this story would not exist. And neither would I.